The evening had settled softly over the old house, the kind of evening that moves slowly and feels as though it has been waiting for the right moment to reveal something tender. I had just finished clearing the dishes when my father called my name in that quiet way that made me pause before answering. There was nothing urgent in his voice, nothing heavy or demanding, yet something in the way he said it felt deliberate, almost ceremonial. I followed him into the living room, a place where sunlight used to fall in bright squares when I was little, where laughter had filled the air so often that I could almost hear echoes of it when the room grew still. He sat in his usual spot, the corner of the sofa that had shaped itself to him over the years, and he waited for me to sit near him. The lamp beside him cast a soft, golden light across his face, highlighting the gentle tiredness in his eyes and the faint lines along his forehead that had grown deeper with time. He smiled at me, small, tender, tinged with something like nostalgia, and for a moment it was as though all the years between my childhood and now folded together. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady but held a quiet tremor beneath it, the sort that comes from carrying thoughts too meaningful to rush. He told me he wanted to share something, not because something was wrong, but because he felt it was time. His words drifted slowly, carefully, as if he were placing each one into the space between us with intention. I listened the way you listen to a melody you've never heard yet somehow recognize. He began with memories, his, not mine, stories from a time before I existed, when he was young and trying to untangle the threads of life with more hope than certainty. He spoke about choices that shaped him, some made with bold confidence, others with trembling hands. He admitted there were days when he questioned everything and nights when he felt lost, unsure whether he was becoming the person he wanted to be. I had never heard him talk about his youth with such vulnerability, and the honesty in his voice warmed something deep inside me. As he spoke, he glanced toward the window where dusk was fading into night, and for a heartbeat he looked much younger, like the man I had seen in old photographs tucked into drawers and albums. He laughed softly while sharing small adventures, moments of silliness, spontaneous escapades, unexpected friendships, and then quieted as he revealed the struggles that had once kept him awake long after the world had fallen asleep. Somehow, knowing he had walked through uncertainty made my own uncertainties feel less lonely. He shifted then, turning the stories gently toward my mother, speaking her name with a softness that carried 1,000 memories. He told me things I had never known, how nervous he had been the first time he saw her, how she held her courage like a small, glowing lantern that illuminated everything around her, how her laughter had created spaces where people felt safe to be themselves. As he described their early days together, his face brightened, and I could feel her presence in the room, like a warm breeze drifting through a half-open window. There were stories I had heard before, but this time they sounded different, richer, as if the years had seasoned them with new understanding. He spoke of the way she used to prepare herself before any important conversation, pacing lightly across the room, whispering to herself until she found the perfect words. He said she believed in the power of gentle honesty, in the quiet courage it took to speak from the heart. Hearing that made me smile, because in certain moments I could almost feel that same trait stirring within me. When he spoke about her absence, his voice turned fragile, yet there was no bitterness, only a kind of reverent sadness that honored what had been. He told me he still talked to her sometimes, not expecting answers but feeling comfort in the act. He said he hoped she could see me now, and the way his voice wavered made something inside me ache. I reached for his hand without thinking, and he squeezed mine with a gratefulness that said more than words ever could. He then began speaking not of the past, but of me, of the person he saw when he looked at me, the one I often failed to see myself. He said he noticed the kindness I thought went unseen, the resilience I didn't realize I possessed. He talked about the gentle way I listened, how I carried compassion in my voice, and the way I leaned into challenges even when they frightened me. I felt a warmth spread through my chest, the rare kind that comes from being truly seen. He said he wanted me to understand something important, that the world would try to measure me in ways that had nothing to do with who I truly was. There would be moments when I would be praised for things that didn't matter and moments when I would be misunderstood for the things that did. Through it all, he urged me to hold close the values that shaped our family, the quiet strength, the willingness to care, the bravery to choose gentleness even when the world rewarded noise. His tone shifted again, becoming both firmer and more tender, like someone placing their hands around a fragile object they want to protect. He told me that joy is often hidden in the simplest of moments, and that most people spend their lives searching for happiness in distant places when it often waits patiently at their feet. He reminded me of mornings when we used to sit on the porch watching the world wake up, or evenings when we baked small, imperfect cookies just for the pleasure of making something together. Those moments, he said, were life speaking softly, inviting us to notice it. As he talked, I watched his face in the dim light. His eyes held that familiar mix of determination and gentleness, the same look he used to give me when teaching me to be brave without demanding it. His hands moved subtly as he explained things, the same hands that once guided me across busy streets or steadied my bicycle when I wobbled. The years had changed him, softened some parts, etched lines into others, but he carried the same steady sincerity he always had. He spoke about mistakes, calling them teachers disguised as stumbles, and about how no life worth living was ever free of them. He told me that mistakes did not diminish a person's goodness, so long as they learned, apologized when needed, and kept trying to grow. He admitted he had made many, some small and some large, and that he hoped I would treat myself with more compassion than he sometimes treated himself. Then came a pause, a long, thoughtful hush that stretched between us like an exhale waiting to become words. He looked at me with an expression I had only seen a handful of times, one that held a mixture of pride, longing, and quiet hope. He told me he wanted to share not advice, but wishes, hopes he carried for my future. He said he didn't dream of grand achievements or extraordinary success for me, not because he doubted my abilities, but because he understood that such things were hollow without peace. He wished for me a life filled with genuine connections, with people who saw my worth without needing to be convinced. He wished for me days filled with laughter that felt unforced, mornings where I woke with a sense of purpose, and nights where I felt proud of how I had spent my time. He said he hoped I would never lose the softness in my heart, even when the world challenged it, because gentleness was not a weakness, it was a quiet, powerful kind of courage. Hearing him say that made something inside me settle, like a truth finding its rightful place. He leaned back slightly, as though gathering strength, and then told me that being my father had been the most profound experience of his life. Not the easiest, he clarified with a hint of humor, but certainly the most meaningful. He described watching me grow as witnessing a story unfold, sometimes surprising, sometimes challenging, always beautiful. He said he often wondered if he was doing enough, giving enough, being enough, and that seeing me now helped reassure him that love, even imperfect, had been enough. A thick stillness filled the room as his words sank into me. Outside, darkness had fully settled, pressing gently against the windows like a quiet reminder that time was moving forward, even as we sat suspended in this moment. The air felt different, denser, warmer, as though the space around us had absorbed the emotions we had shared and was holding them tenderly. He shifted closer and rested his hand on my shoulder, a gesture that carried the weight of years, of all the moments he had comforted me, protected me, guided me. His touch felt like a bridge between the child I once was and the person I was becoming. When he finally spoke again, his voice was softer, slower, as though he wanted each word to sink gently into the deepest part of me. He told me that life would offer me countless paths, some bright and welcoming, others shadowed and uncertain. He hoped I would choose not the easiest path, but the truest one. The one that aligned with my values, my dreams, my sense of self. He reminded me that courage didn't always look bold. Sometimes it looked like simply choosing to listen to one's own heart. As he continued, I felt a quiet warmth spreading through the room, a warmth not from the lamp or the fading remnants of daylight, but from the connection between us. It was a warmth made of memory, of love, of words long stored and finally spoken. And in that moment, I understood that what he was giving me was not just guidance or stories. It was a piece of himself, a legacy of tenderness and wisdom shaped by years of living, loving, and learning. When my father's voice faded into a thoughtful silence, he took a slow breath as though steadying himself before continuing. I could feel that everything he wanted to say still lived inside him, like a tide waiting to reach the shore. He wasn't finished, not yet. There was more he needed to place in my hands, pieces of his heart he had carried quietly for years. He shifted slightly on the sofa, and the cushions sighed under his weight, a soft reminder of how many evenings we had spent here without realizing how precious they were. Then he began to speak again, this time with a tone that felt deeper, as if he had opened a door inside himself that he rarely let anyone see. He told me that one of the greatest discoveries of his life was understanding how fragile time truly is. When he was younger, he said, he believed that time moved endlessly and generously, always offering second chances, but life had taught him slowly and firmly that time was more like a gentle visitor, present, meaningful, but never promised. He said this not to frighten me, but to urge me to cherish the people I love, to speak the words that matter, and to notice the moments that might otherwise slip away unnoticed. He admitted that he spent too many years moving quickly through life, always rushing toward the next task or responsibility, believing that slowing down was something he could afford later. It wasn't until after my mother passed, he said, that he realized how many small moments he would have given anything to relive. Moments that at the time had seemed ordinary, almost forgettable, the way she hummed while folding laundry, the sleepy smile she gave him every morning, the quiet conversations they shared over late-night cups of tea. Those moments, once overlooked, had become treasures he guarded fiercely in memory. As he spoke, I noticed the slightest tremble in his hands, not from weakness but from the weight of honesty. He wasn't telling me these things out of regret alone, he was sharing them, because he wanted my life to be different. He hoped I would not wait until memories became the only place where certain moments existed. He leaned back again and let his eyes settle on me with so much warmth that I felt wrapped in it. He said he wanted me to live deliberately, not letting days blur into one another, but choosing to be present, even when life felt ordinary. Especially then, he reminded me that joy often hides in the folds of everyday living, in the things we do without thinking, pouring a cup of water, opening a window to let fresh air in, sitting beside someone we love in comfortable silence. He said that if I learned to appreciate those moments, I would never feel starved for happiness. His words stirred something in me, a quiet recognition that I had often moved too quickly through my own days, assuming the future would always offer another chance to slow down. Listening to him made me want to change that, to breathe more deeply, to look more closely, to choose presence over hurry. He lifted his gaze toward a framed photo on the wall. The three of us smiling on a bright morning, the sunlight behind us forming a soft halo around my mother's hair. He said that after she was gone, he tried so hard to stay strong for me, that he sometimes forgot he was allowed to grieve too. He told me that during those early years he often felt as though he was learning to walk again, balancing his sorrow and my needs on legs that felt too unsteady. He confessed that there were nights he feared he was failing, nights when he sat alone in the dark wondering if he was enough. He said he never wanted me to carry that worry. He wanted me to remember him as steady and strong, but now he felt I was old enough to understand that strength does not mean being unbreakable. True strength, he said, comes from continuing to love, even when life gives you reasons to close your heart. I watched him carefully as he shared this, seeing not a man weakened by grief but a man made more human by it. There was something profoundly beautiful in the way he allowed himself to be vulnerable with me, not as a confession of inadequacy, but as a gift of truth. He spoke then about courage, not the loud kind that fills stories or legends, but the quiet, steady courage that carries people through ordinary days. He said that courage often looks like choosing kindness when you're tired, or forgiving someone who never apologized, or reaching out for help when you feel lost. It looks like trying again after a disappointment, or admitting that you don't know what to do next but taking a step anyway. He wanted me to understand that courage wasn't a feeling. It was a choice. As he spoke, I felt his words settle inside me like small lanterns lighting paths I hadn't yet walked. I realized then that everything he was telling me wasn't just for now, it was for the future. A future where he hoped I would find strength not through perfection, but through understanding myself deeply and gently. His expression softened even more as he shifted to talk about love. He said that real love grows not through dramatic gestures, but through simple, consistent acts of care. He described the way my mother used to leave notes in his coat pocket on cold mornings, or how she always made space for him to speak even when she disagreed. He said love was built in those quiet moments, where two people choose each other again and again, without fanfare. He told me he hoped I would one day find a love that felt like a home rather than a performance. A love where I could show my flaws without fear and where I could offer the same safety in return. He said that love wasn't supposed to feel like a constant test, it was meant to be a refuge. Hearing this made me feel a kind of peace, as if he had handed me a compass for navigating the future. The room had grown darker, the golden glow of the lamp becoming the only light between us. Shadows pooled gently in the corners, and the air felt warm and still. I could hear the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, a familiar sound I had never truly noticed until now. Everything around us felt suspended, as though time itself was pausing to let this moment unfold undisturbed. My father shifted again, looking at me with an intensity that made me straighten slightly. He told me he wanted to speak about identity, about the person I was and the person I was becoming. He said that identity wasn't something we discovered in a single moment, it was something we shaped every day through our choices. He encouraged me to build myself not from expectations or comparisons, but from truth. He said that if I rooted myself in values that mattered to me, kindness, integrity, curiosity, patience, then my life would always have direction, even when I felt uncertain. He reminded me that I didn't need to rush toward adulthood, that growing up was not a race but a gradual unfolding. He said he wanted me to grant myself the grace to change, to outgrow old versions of myself, to begin again when needed. Hearing him speak this way felt like receiving permission I didn't even realize I had been waiting for. He paused then to take a slow sip of water, and I watched the way his hands cradled the glass. It struck me how many times those hands had supported me, steadying me when I was small, guiding me when I hesitated, comforting me when I cried. I wondered how many quiet battles they had fought without me ever knowing. He set the glass down and continued speaking, now sharing small lessons he had collected, lessons he hoped I would carry with me. He talked about patience, describing it not as waiting, but as trusting the process of life. He talked about resilience, not as the ability to endure without breaking, but as the ability to grow stronger in the places where you once felt weak. He reminded me to be generous with forgiveness, both toward others and toward myself, because resentment weighed heavily on the heart. He spoke about gratitude, explaining that acknowledging the good in life made the hardships more bearable and the simple moments more beautiful. Every word felt like it had been polished by years of living, shaped by both joy and loss. Eventually, he leaned back and exhaled slowly, as though releasing something he had held inside for too long. He looked exhausted but peaceful, as if sharing these truths had lightened a burden he had carried quietly. I felt my own heart growing heavy with emotion, yet lighter with understanding at the same time. He reached for my hand again, holding it with a firmness that felt protective and filled with love. He told me that as I grew older, I would encounter people who misunderstood me, moments that tested me, and choices that frightened me. But he believed, deeply, unwaveringly, that I had the strength to navigate all of it. He said he could see a quiet determination in me, the same kind my mother had carried with such grace. He reminded me that I would never be alone, not truly. Even when circumstances separated us, even when life pulled me in different directions, his love would remain a constant presence, an anchor, a guide, a shelter. He said this not dramatically, but with a calm sincerity that made me believe him completely. The night deepened outside, and the air in the room grew cooler, but I felt warm from the strength of what he had shared. I realized that this evening wasn't simply a conversation. It was a turning point, a moment that would live in my memory with the same clarity as a bright sunrise. It felt as though something within me had shifted, opening into a deeper understanding of myself, of him, and of the invisible threads that bind us. He smiled at me then, not with the lightness of earlier, but with a quiet pride that filled his entire expression. There were still words left in him. I could see it in the way his gaze softened, and in the slight curve of his mouth. And I knew, without needing to hear it yet, that he was preparing to offer me the final pieces of his heart's wisdom. The room felt almost sacred now, as if the quiet itself were listening. My father took another breath, one that settled into the space like a gentle sigh. He looked older in that moment, not in a fragile way, but in a way that reflected all the years he had lived, all the moments he had carried, all the memories he had guarded. And yet his eyes held a kind of brightness, a calm certainty that softened the edges of the night. He shifted slightly and began speaking again, his voice steady but wrapped in a tenderness that made every word feel carefully chosen. He said he wanted to talk about the future, not the distant, unreachable one, but the future that begins with the very next sunrise. He told me that life is filled with crossroads where the path forward is never fully clear. He said I might stand at those intersections many times, feeling torn between what feels safe and what feels true. In those moments, he urged me to listen not to fear, but to the quiet voice inside me that understands what matters most. He said that voice may be soft, but it is wise, made from all the experiences I have lived and all the love I have received. He paused, letting the thought sink into me before continuing. He told me he didn't want my life to be built on fear, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of disappointment. Instead, he wanted me to build my life on curiosity and hope. He said that hope is not a fragile thing. Hope is a steady flame that has guided people through the darkest nights. And curiosity, he said, keeps the heart alive, teaching us to look beyond what is comfortable and familiar. As he spoke, I watched his face in the soft glow of the lamp. His expression carried a kind of peaceful resolve, as if he were placing something precious into my keeping. He talked about how everyone's journey is different, and how comparing my path to others would only steal joy from the moments meant for me. He encouraged me to walk at my own pace, to trust that growth happens quietly and gradually, and to understand that becoming the person I am meant to be is not something I have to force. It is something that unfolds over time. He leaned forward slightly, his tone turning thoughtful, and said that one of the greatest gifts I could give myself was the freedom to dream without limitations. He urged me to chase dreams not because they were impressive to others, but because they ignited something within me. He reminded me that success looks different for everyone, and that the world's definition of it might not match the one that feels right in my heart. He wanted me to define success in a way that aligned with my own values, in acts of kindness, in meaningful work, in deep connections, in moments of quiet joy. His words settled gently around me, warm like a blanket placed over my shoulders. Then he began speaking about change, about how life has a way of shifting when we least expect it. He said that even the best plans sometimes unravel, and that some paths leading into darkness eventually open into light. He told me not to fear change, but to meet it with curiosity, because often it is change that reveals strengths we didn't know we had. And when things feel uncertain, he said, I should remember that uncertainty is not an enemy. It is simply a reminder that I am still growing. There was a tenderness in his voice as he said this, a tenderness that made me feel both anchored and free. He reached over and gently brushed a strand of hair from my face, the way he used to when I was little and half asleep in his arms. The touch was familiar and comforting, a bridge connecting the child I had been to the person I was now. He spoke then about the importance of community. The people who surround us, inspire us, challenge us, and walk with us through life. He told me that the world is filled with individuals who wake up each morning carrying their own burdens, hopes, and fears, and that treating them with kindness was one of the most powerful things I could do. He said that even the smallest act of empathy could change the course of someone's day, sometimes even their life. He told me that choosing to be kind, even when the world felt harsh, was an act of quiet bravery, and he reminded me that kindness did not mean allowing others to take advantage of me. Kindness could coexist with boundaries. Kindness could be firm, clear, steady. It could protect without harming. It could stand strong without raising its voice. As he shared these thoughts, I noticed something shift in his expression, an almost wistful softness. He spoke about how lonely the world can sometimes feel, even when surrounded by people, and how vital it was to seek connections that nourish the heart. He said that true friends will walk beside me, not only in moments of joy, but in moments of doubt, and that I should treasure the ones who stay when life becomes complicated. He smiled gently as he continued, telling me stories about friendships he had formed when he was young. Friendships built on long conversations, shared secrets, and a kind of trust that felt unbreakable. Some of those friendships had faded with time, he admitted, while others grew stronger. He said that friendships are like gardens, needing care and attention, but also needing patience because they grow differently for everyone. He paused again, letting the silence settle like a soft blanket before he spoke of responsibility. He said that the choices I make, big or small, will shape not only my life but also the lives of others in ways I may never fully realize. He encouraged me to hold that responsibility gently but firmly, to understand its weight without letting it overwhelm me. He said that responsibility didn't have to be a burden. It could be a guiding light, helping me choose actions that aligned with the person I wanted to be. His voice softened as he added that responsibility also meant caring for myself. He reminded me that rest was not laziness, that asking for help was not weakness, and that taking time to heal was not selfish. He said that the world sometimes convinces us we must be endlessly strong, endlessly productive, endlessly perfect, but that such expectations are impossible and unkind. He wanted me to treat myself with compassion, to acknowledge my limits, and to trust that being human was not a flaw but a gift. As he spoke, I felt a slow warmth rising in my chest, a warmth made from love, understanding, and the quiet comfort of being so deeply cared for. I realized then how much it must have taken for him to gather all these thoughts, how many nights he must have spent reflecting on what he wanted to tell me, how carefully he must have chosen each word. He sat back for a moment and let his gaze wander around the room, taking in the shelves lined with books, the old armchair my mother used to sit in, the rug worn down by years of footsteps. He said that this house held so many memories he could almost hear them. Soft laughter rising from the corners, footsteps echoing faintly, voices drifting like old melodies. He told me that memories were blessings, not anchors, and that carrying them forward did not mean I had to stay in place. They could accompany me without weighing me down, like gentle reminders of where I came from and who had shaped me. His voice grew softer, almost poetic, as he said that life is a tapestry of moments, woven with threads of joy, sorrow, love, fear, hope, and loss. He said that without each of those threads, the tapestry would be incomplete. He urged me not to hide from any of them but to embrace them, to let them teach me how to live with depth and gratitude. Then he looked at me with a tenderness that made my eyes sting. He told me he wanted to share the most important thing of all, that I was enough, not because of what I had achieved, not because of what I might accomplish in the future, but because of who I was. Quiet moments, imperfections, strengths, fears, and all. He said he wished he could place that truth inside me so firmly that it could never be shaken by doubt or criticism. He leaned forward, took both my hands in his, and held them tightly. His voice trembled just slightly as he told me that no matter where life took me, no matter what successes or failures lay ahead, he would always be proud of me. Not proud in a distant way, but proud in a way that lived in every heartbeat, in every memory, in every hope he carried. Proud in a way that felt unconditional and unwavering. The room felt silent once more, but it was not an empty silence. It was full of meaning, full of emotion, full of all the words he had spoken and all the feelings they had awakened. I felt my eyes fill with tears, not from sadness, but from a deep sense of connection, of gratitude, of love. He reached out and gently pulled me into an embrace, holding me with the same strength he had held me with as a child, yet with a tenderness that felt even deeper now. I rested my head against him, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, feeling the warmth of his arms around me, sensing the unspoken promise in his embrace. When we finally pulled apart, he cupped my face in his hands and looked at me as though memorizing the moment. He told me that everything he had shared tonight was not a farewell, not a final message, but simply a part of the ongoing story between us. He said that no matter how many years passed, no matter how our lives changed, he hoped I would carry these words with me, not as burdens, but as lights. He rose slowly from the sofa, stretching slightly, and for a moment I saw the outline of the man he used to be. The one who lifted me high into the air when I was small, the one who stayed awake beside me when I was sick, the one who worked tirelessly to give me a world that felt safe. He looked back at me with a soft smile, one filled with contentment and peace. The night outside the window was deep now, a velvet darkness speckled with distant stars. The air felt cool against my skin, yet I felt wrapped in warmth from the inside out. The conversation we had shared lingered in my heart like a quiet melody, one I knew I would carry with me for the rest of my life. As he walked toward the hallway, he paused once more and turned to me. His voice was barely above a whisper as he told me that love, real love, never fades. It shifts, it transforms, it grows, but it never disappears. And he hoped that whenever life felt heavy or confusing, I would return to this moment, to these words, to the certainty that I was loved beyond measure. When he finally left the room, the soft echo of his footsteps drifted away down the hall, leaving me alone with the dim light and the warmth of everything he had shared. I sat quietly, letting the emotions settle into me like leaves drifting to the bottom of a still pond. I felt changed, not in a dramatic way, but in a way that felt deep and lasting, like a new layer of understanding had been placed gently over my heart. The lamp hummed faintly beside me, and the house seemed to breathe with a calm rhythm, carrying the echoes of our conversation into its walls. I closed my eyes for a moment, and in the darkness behind my eyelids, I saw not only my father's face but the light in his eyes when he spoke of hope, of love, of courage, of the future. And in that quiet space, I understood that this evening had become a part of me, a part I would carry into every decision, every challenge, every dream. I understood that his words were not just lessons, they were a legacy, a gentle guiding hand that would continue to steady me long after the night had faded. When I opened my eyes again, the room was filled with a quiet kind of magic, a stillness that felt both fragile and strong. I stood slowly, letting my feet sink into the familiar softness of the rug, and I walked toward the window. The night sky stretched endlessly above me, dark yet scattered with distant lights. Tiny reminders that even in the deepest darkness, there is always something shining. I pressed my hand against the cool glass and took a long breath, feeling the weight of the world soften just a little. I felt grateful for my father, for his words, for the love that had shaped my life. Grateful for the quiet courage he saw in me, even on the days when I couldn't feel it myself. And as I stood there, listening to the distant hush of the night, I whispered a promise to myself. A promise to carry forward the wisdom he had given me, to live with the same gentleness and strength he had shown, to honor the love that had been passed down to me with every breath, every choice, every step. A promise to live a life filled with light, even when the path grew dim. The house around me felt warm, alive, and full of memory, and I knew that no matter where the future took me, no matter how far I wandered, I would always be connected to this place, to him, to the words that had shaped me. I turned away from the window and let the darkness of the room wrap around me softly, resting in the quiet truth that I was cherished, guided, and deeply loved. And with that understanding glowing gently in my heart, I stepped forward into the night stillness, carrying with me not just the lessons of this evening, but the enduring light of my Father's love, steady, unwavering, forever.